One.
This is Paul Schneiderman today on the 162nd edition, I believe it is, of the Sports Untold podcast, also on the Seattle-based Rainier Avenue Radio.world. And my special guest today is the Channel 13 Seattle Fox TV broadcaster, Aaron Levine. And Aaron has had a great career. I'm going to get back to Aaron in a minute. We're going to have a fun chat. My assistant, sidekick, and producer is Olivia Coyne. Olivia was actually the lead interviewer in a Sports Untold edition recently. And Olivia, I go back to Olivia and her family a long time. Her dad's a close friend. And Olivia is still working, helping out the podcast. And she's now in her second semester at Seattle Law School. But she's working really hard, but still enjoying working at my firm, I believe, in some podcast stuff. So my podcast is also on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Google, iTunes, Podbean. You go to sportsuntoldpodcast.net. You can listen on a bunch of these different outlets. You can also just go to my website, plslobsters.com, or you can just Google Sports Untold YouTube. All right, Aaron. Aaron Levine's a Stanford graduate, a California native. He's currently the sports director at Fox 13 Seattle. Let me make sure I have your biography down accurately, Aaron. Correct me if I say anything wrong. Aaron joined Fox 13 Seattle back in 2007. He is the principal host of Fox 13 Seahawks coverage, and he hosts a show which I enjoy, Seattle Sports Live on Sunday nights. Did I give you a pretty good short bio there? Aaron, and get his thoughts on a range of sports topics, maybe a few other topics as well. So, Aaron, again, thank you for coming on the 162nd edition of Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. And first off, it's always great. Pastures greener on the other side, right? Because if I had to go back to Stanford and do this all over again, I probably would have wanted to go to law school. So it's funny how things work out.
And I have my moments where sometimes I wish I went into broadcast journalism. So, it cuts your voice. The thing with this podcast, I don't have a million listeners or anything, but I can get a small little taste of that, a kind of a quasi taste of it, I guess. But anyhow, it's been fun. So, Aaron, I know you were covering the Seahawks Super Bowl week down in the Bay Area, and I want to know about Radio Row. It sounds like a fantasy football camp for big football fans. Tell me about Radio Row a little bit.
Well, I only spent a couple of nights there. I was there on Thursday and then Friday night when they were pretty much cleaning everything up because it was the end of a work week. So we did an entire show, half
Yeah.
hour with a bunch of construction vehicles behind us as everything was coming down. Alyssa Charleston Smith, my colleague, was on Radio Row most of the week and she was doing most of the morning show. Let me just preface this by saying Super Bowl this year was a logistical nightmare for people that wanted to get around the Bay Area because you had the Seahawks staying in San Jose, and that's where I was primarily based. They were practicing at San Jose State University. The game was in Santa Clara at Levi Stadium. The Patriots were staying in the South Bay area, and they were practicing at Stanford. And then you had most of the media that was staying up in the city of San Francisco. That's where the main media center was. That's where Radio Row was. That's where NFL Experience was. And they made media, even if you were staying in the South Bay, to get your game day pass for the game itself, Super Bowl, in San Francisco. So it was a 2 hour commute essentially, because once you got to the city, it was about 45 minutes to go 5 blocks just to get to parking for Radio Row. So I say that once you were inside, though, it was, as you mentioned, a dream come true for anybody who is aware of the who's who in sports when it comes to former Super Bowl champions, former great athletes in the NFL, because they are all making appearances on various shows throughout Radio Row. You never know who you're going to run into. I think Alyssa had a lot more run-ins than I did this past week, but it was still fun nonetheless.
Sounds like a lot of fun. And to use a little Yiddish word, it sounds like a real schlep getting around.
It was one big schlep for sure.
Yeah, right. Eric, did you have a favorite moment during the Super Bowl game? And did you have a favorite moment during outside the game and covering the Super Bowl?
I think looking back, my favorite moment in the game itself was Riley Mills getting his first career NFL sack, the fifth round draft pick rookie out of Notre Dame. Hadn't heard of him much throughout the season, and his first ever sack comes in the Super Bowl of all things. And to finish that game, the Seahawks defense with 6 sacks of Drake May. We knew that offensive line was vulnerable. And now we've heard from a couple of players, including Julian Love, who answered the question, when did you think you guys had him? And he basically said the middle of the first quarter. And that wasn't any disrespect toward the Patriots. It was just that they knew what the Patriots were doing. They felt as a defense that they were that good that they could handle that offense. And we saw the majority of the game that be exactly the case. There was a point there where we thought the Seahawks might shut out an opponent for the first time ever in a Super Bowl. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but it was such a dominating effort that the whole world got to see how good the dark side defense was.
I love that sack moment of the rookie. That's an underrated moment in the Super Bowl. I love that. You just gave me a whole new thought on a cool moment in the game. That's neat. That's neat. And what was your favorite moment outside the Super Bowl stadium during the week?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'll be honest, I actually had a chance to go to Stanford University for a couple of hours. I had this idea. We were driving from San Jose. We had to do a show up in San Francisco, and we slowly made our way up from San Jose to Stanford, then Stanford to Pacifica, because we had to do a live shot for our 4 o'clock show in Pacifica. Couldn't get to Radio Row in time for the 5 o'clock live shot, so we stopped on the side of the road in San Francisco and did it on a random sidewalk. But before that, we had lunch at Stanford, and my idea was, since the presence of security was so strong in and around the Patriots practice facility, and they were using Stanford's football fields, that I thought, well, maybe I should use my insider knowledge of the campus and go to the top of Hoover Tower. And that way I could spy on the Patriots and look down at their practice. And that would be completely justified given the Patriots association with Spygate back in the day. So that's exactly what I did, made it to the top of Hoover Tower. And unfortunately, there was a building right in the way. You could see the uprights of the practice fields right off the top of the building, but the building itself was blocking the practice field. So we weren't able to spy on the Patriots, but it was really fun to be back on campus for the first time in a while.
I love your kind of confession here and what you attempted to do. So,
yeah, we tried. We put it up on Instagram also, and I had nothing to hide. We didn't do anything illegal, and I felt like I was going to be justified nonetheless.
Speaking of Stanford, I have an uncle who's not much older than me who went there. Great school. I've been in the campus a couple times. And I was going to ask this question later, but I think it's not a bad time to ask it now. There's been some great Stanford football players in history. I'll name a few. John Elway, Jim Plunkett, Andrew Luck, Christian McCaffrey, Gene Washington, James Lofton, Ernie Nevers by the 1920s. Who's your favorite Stanford football player in history?
Well, it was John Lynch until he went over to the 49ers. And so,
yeah.
I would say Elway. I was a huge John Elway fan growing up. In fact, when I was growing up in LA, we had the Raiders and the Rams, and I was not a fan of either one. I liked John Elway, and I also liked Boomer Esiason and the Cincinnati Bengals just because of the Ickey Shuffle, and also because I was 6 years old and I liked the Bengals helmets and uniforms. But John Elway was one of my favorite teams with the Broncos when I was 6, 7 years old also, and them getting close to winning championships then and then finally breaking through, I believe in 1998, was really fun to watch.
I with you. Elway is a great quarterback, and I remember the Broncos, Seahawks rivalry very well growing up. I'm going to throw something about Jim Plunkett, though. He has a very interesting life story. I think both his parents were blind, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so Jim Plunkett has an interesting life story, and I like how he came back and won the Super Bowl in '83. I think everyone was having his biography up here somewhere, but I always admired Jim Plunkett, so I wanted to throw that in.
And I'll also throw out Andrew Luck just because, talk about the glory days of 3 or 4 straight years. I went to the Rose Bowl for 3 of those years when Luck was there, and then when the quarterback after that, and with Stephon Taylor and that whole group and Toby Gerhart, all of that group under David Shaw, between Harbaugh and Shaw building that program into the powerhouse that it was really something that I'm never going to take for granted given where the program is now.
Do you remain a big Stanford sports fan?
I am. I admittedly am a bandwagon fan, but I will always keep an eye on how all their programs are doing.
No matter what conference they're in.
Yeah, exactly. ACC right now, but who knows next year?
Exactly. Aaron, how did you get the bug to go into grew up in LA, you mentioned. How did you get the bug to go into sports media? Talk about that.
Honestly, my mom was the biggest sports fan growing up. My earliest memories are walking in on her watching the Celtics Lakers NBA Finals when I was 5, 6 years old in 87, 88, and the rivalry with the Detroit Pistons and the Bad Boys in Detroit. So I was a big Lakers fan growing up. She was also a huge Dodgers fan. So I became a Dodgers fan growing up as well. Loved sports. The joke was that the first thing I ever read was the sports page. I was reading the sports page in the LA Times when I was 5, 6 years old. And I enjoyed sports so much. And then I also really enjoyed writing. And so kind of blending the two became the perfect career for myself. I was very lucky to get an internship at the LA Daily News after being a stringer in
Oh,
high school, going out to high school football games and writing 6-inch stories on Friday nights about those games. What I didn't like about newspaper writing was it would come out the next day. It would say my name by Aaron Levine, and yet most of the stuff that I had written had been gone through copy editors galore, and it wouldn't necessarily reflect exactly what I had written the night before. So I really didn't feel like it was fair that it would say by me, and yet the copy itself wasn't by me. And that's why I sort of gravitated toward a media field where it was either radio or TV, whether it was my face, my voice, where I could own it myself and kind of make it my own.
Aaron, yeah, that's it's always fun to hear about someone's background and making it into any field. I'm aware of your heritage. You have a Jewish and a Filipino heritage, and kind of talk about the two cultures that you blended into with your parents. And one thing I have found about the Jewish faith and the Filipino community, both cultures love food. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, they love food, they love smiling, and they love laughing. And so go over to my mom's side of the family on a Christmas morning and or any holiday, and there would be bursts of laughter from every single corner of that household. My mom converted before I was born. And so, yeah, the Jewish community has been incredible also in terms of all the holidays and enjoying that as well. So, and food, you're right. I mean, the food of all cultures is amazing. I grew up on pancit and lumpia from Filipino culture. It was always out there on holidays. My grandma, which we called mom, my mom's mom, she was amazing, an amazing chef, an amazing cook, and to this day, nobody can make pancit like my grandma could.
I've been to the Philippines. I got there once. Amazing experience. So that's neat. That's neat. Well, that's I wanted you to share about your cultures that you're part of. It's that's fun. That's fun. All right, Aaron. So I've asked this question a bunch of people, and I don't know if everyone likes this question, but I feel free to give me your take on it. But this is President's Day week, so I think this question's a little more timely this week. Um, I got this question from Chris Saliza. He was on CNN. I have his book right here,
Yeah.
a book about the presidents in sports. So you were born during the Reagan years. If you could have a sports only conversation, sports only, this question is not who your favorite president is, but a sports only conversation with a president in your lifetime, who would it be?
It would probably be either George W. Bush because of his association with baseball and his time with the Texas Rangers, or Dwight Eisenhower only because of the number of times he was able to play Augusta National Golf Course to the point where he had a tree named after him on the 17th hole for a while because he hit it so often. That would be the one course that I would absolutely love to play. I've had the privilege of playing Cypress Point and Pebble Beach a couple of times, but Augusta would be the one that I would drop everything to play at least one time. So yeah, to have the conversation with Dwight Eisenhower would be probably exciting, especially because of his time leading this country during World War II, leading the army during World War II, and then leading the country after that. And then obviously George W. Bush because of his association with baseball.
So W. Bush would be the president in your lifetime you'd want to talk sports with. Good, good answer. Other
Yeah.
people mentioned W. Bush, and they figure the president who who was around before your lifetime would be Eisenhower, probably
Yep.
to talk sports. Yeah, yeah. I asked my stepfather. He's going to be 88 this year, and he told me that he thinks Eisenhower would be the president he'd want to have a sports only conversation with. He liked football. He was a golfer. So. Yeah, no, good. There's no wrong answer. I was just curious. Okay.
Yeah.
President's Day week question, right? So okay.
Of course.
Aaron, who is a living sports figure, someone who's still with us, you would enjoy interviewing and spending time with? And who's a deceased sports figure in history you would have enjoyed interviewing or spending time with?
I'll just go back to say my favorite sports figure to interview in general, and that is Sue Bird. She was always and is always so accommodating with her time, is so outgoing, so personable, makes you feel like you're important, whether she knows you or not. She just has a really great way about her, and I'm not surprised that she'll eventually get into media of some sort or be successful in whatever she does. And talk about one of the most accomplished athletes of all time, probably the most accomplished athlete in Seattle sports history, given the number of gold medals she had and the NCAA championships, and you have 4 championships with the Storm also. So I would say that in terms of somebody that I've already interviewed that I absolutely love interviewing and continue to is Sue Bird. If I had to interview anybody else, like I know Tiger Woods is not the best interview in the world. I just love to be able to spend the day with him and play around a golf with him. I just think that would be so interesting to see how he goes about it. Maybe it wouldn't be interesting by the end of it. I don't know, but just to be in his presence. I was able to meet him one time. I actually tried out for the golf team and walked onto the golf team at Stanford my freshman year. So I was there for about 3 weeks or so with the team, learned what it was like to be a Division I athlete before I got cut from that team. But during that time, Stanford played Texas in a football game before all the undergraduates came out, and Tiger came to that game. We were able to go down onto the track at the time. This is the old Stanford Stadium, and got to shake his hand. And that was just a welcome to college moment. This is an oh my God moment early on. So that was fun. If you're talking about a deceased athlete, I haven't really thought about that one.
Or sports figure. Doesn't mean just someone in the sports world.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably go with Jackie Robinson just because it's such a remarkable story. And I mean, the bravery it took for someone like him to take on so many, so many racist people at the time, and so many people who were against his success and him breaking the color barrier in the sport of baseball, and what he must have endured on a day-to-day basis is just remarkable and incredible. And I'm so glad that he is remembered for the bravery that he had during that time, and that his jersey number is retired for all teams, throughout baseball now.
Jack would be really high on my list to see sports figures. Also throw in Josh Gibson, who was a great Negro League player.
Yeah.
And Satchel Paige would have been fascinating.
Absolutely.
59 years old, throwing in the major leagues, and Satchel played in the Negro Leagues and Major League Baseball. So, I mean, there's so many, but Jackie comes up a lot. But I want to throw in Josh Gibson, Satchel Paige, too, because man, some of their experiences were fascinating. All right. Who is a current Seattle sports broadcaster? I know you know a lot of them, but who's someone you'd love to just have a half hour and pick their brain with?
That's a good question. I'd probably say Rick Rizzs. And I've been able to talk baseball with him for a while in the past, especially during this baseball season and being on the road during the playoffs, during the ALDS and the ALCS. Rick was so gracious with his time. We had a lot of time on the air, and he devoted a lot of the time to spend with us, especially during, rain delays in Detroit and before and after games in our morning show here on Fox 13. But he is has such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the game, and has had incredible experiences with a number of teams. I mean, from his start with the Tigers and then also with the Mariners as well. It's just fun to hear the stories that he has. So it's one of those things where I would probably give him the platform for 30 minutes and just let him talk and give me his best stories, as opposed to me asking him questions, because he has so much in there.
I met Rick Rizzs once. Seems like a wonderful guy. Love to get my podcast at some point. Just seems like a great guy. Yeah, that's a great answer. All right, you work as a broadcast journalist. It could be someone outside of sports. Who's a broadcast journalist in history, is no longer with us, we'd love to spend time with? And who's a living broadcast journalist you'd love to spend time with?
Yeah, it's funny. I got to meet Jim Nantz at the Seattle Sports Star of the Year Awards last year, and he is the guy that I would love to spend a day with. Maybe it's play around a golf with him, but he's somebody that I've always looked up to. Mike Tirico would probably be up there as well. I think it's the number of amazing sports events that both of those men have been able to broadcast to watch Nance for so many years go from the Final Four of the NCAA tournament to Augusta National the next week to do the Masters is remarkable. And then to watch Mike Tirico do very similar things like the Super Bowl for NBC, and then you see him in Milan and Cortina doing the Winter Olympics. It's something very similar. So to have those opportunities, very much admire both of those men and their careers and what they've been able to do. If you were thinking back in the day, I mean, Pat Summerall comes to mind, John Madden comes to mind, just because they were such a great tandem for football games back in the day. And then I was fortunate enough to meet Jack Whitaker, who was a correspondent on Wild World of Sports. World Wide.
Right.
Well, Wide World of Sports back in the day too. So,
can you mention a couple of broadcast journalists you admire outside of sports?
Outside of sports, good question. Haven't really thought about it. And there's also a reason why I got into sports as opposed to news. Is sports is in many ways, despite rivalries, having experienced Super Bowl parades in Seattle and Sounders championship parades when they win MLS Cups, it's something that really does bring an entire city together and kind of, brings people from both ends of the political spectrum kind of back all together. But yeah, news-wise, I don't know. Ted Koppel probably comes to mind.
Yeah, great name.
The old Nightline back in the day too. So yeah,
Edward R. Murrow would obviously have been interesting to spend time with.
For sure.
But yeah, Ted Koppel's a great name. Yeah. It's funny. I remember I would sometimes go back and forth between Nightline and the late night comedy shows.
Yeah.
So because I always thought Ted Koppel's show was pretty good. Hey, Olivia, jump in here. I know you got two questions for Aaron.
I have a surprise one that I just came up with, so we'll see
Awesome.
how it goes.
Awesome.
You've been covering the Seahawks or been around that for a couple decades now, correct?
Yeah, I feel old, but yes.
No. So considering the last Super Bowl team we had, it seems like the personalities in, I don't want to say clubhouse, but I guess that's what it is, are very different from what they are today. Do you notice that? Talk a little bit about that if you do notice that difference.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of a difference between those two teams. I used to always say there was so much made about Marshawn Lynch saying, I'm just here so I won't get fined. And they're like, well, there's so much made about him not talking to the media. And I never really cared because there were 52 other incredible personalities on the 53-man roster back in the day that you could go to. And you didn't have to get anything out of Marshawn because you could hear from so many other great personalities on that team. I actually think it's very similar with this year's team, maybe in a different way. They do not have egos. We're talking about that. They play maybe more together from both sides of the ball. There was always that disconnect in the Legion of Boom years between the defense and the quarterback in Russell Wilson. You see a synergy between Sam Darnold and the defense on this team. That's it's much different than 12 years ago, for sure. I mean, the fact that Sam Darnold throws 4 interceptions in a loss to the Rams, and the first person to speak out before he's even asked about it is a linebacker, Ernest Jones IV, who says, I back my quarterback. I trust him. We all trust him. We're going to do this all together, is something you would have never seen 12 years ago with Russell Wilson and that defense. So I think this team is a little bit more united and together from top to bottom than that one was. It's not to say that defense wasn't united back in the day, but I feel like, from both sides is a lot more united than that team. In general, in terms of personality, I think they're all nice guys at the end of the day, and they all have their own unique personalities. So I don't see too much of a difference.
I didn't want to say the word ego just out of, not be rude, but that's something I think as a fan, just really seeing from the outside, it feels like there's a huge difference in ego, but I guess not necessarily, just depends on how much time you spend with them.
Well, I think when you bring ego into the equation, that is one of the main reasons why the Seahawks were never able to complete what's considered a dynasty 12 years ago. They won that first Super Bowl. Well, when they lost that second Super Bowl and the way that they lost it in Super Bowl 49 to the Patriots, egos got in the way. And this team was never the same again. You could see they never got close to sniffing a Super Bowl again. And it was because of those personalities that were so strong on that team. They were never able to reconcile what had happened at the end of that game. I would never want to see something like that happen again, but I think this team is built a little differently. That if something that tragic happened again, and I hope it never would, that this team would be able to recover better than that team would have.
That's really
Interesting.
interesting. Yeah. It's hard to, I mean, really think about what it would be like, but and it's also hard to put together a team without egos. I mean, you have the most intense people who are there for a reason because of their intensity. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. I have another one that kind of throws it back to 2014-ish. Um, does Marshawn have a chance at the Hall of Fame? And do you think his very consistent media appearances now are a part of his kind of campaign?
I don't think it's part of his campaign, but I do think he is worthy of a Hall of Fame running back. I'd have to look at his numbers. And again, it comes down to voters and the numbers. And sometimes numbers don't even do anything too, because take a look at Tony Dungy being in the Hall of Fame and Mike Holmgren not. And if you, or Bill Cowher, I believe, being in the Hall of Fame and Mike Holmgren not. And they have very, very similar records, similar amount of Super Bowls, similar amount of Super Bowl wins. I mean, maybe one or two. It's so close. And yet Holmgren is not in the Hall of Fame. It's really a shame. When it comes to Marshawn Lynch, though, I think Marshawn's just being Marshawn. He enjoys doing things that are out of the box. And that's what his personality is like. I mean, even when he was a player, he went to the local Chili's in Buffalo doing a story with Kenny Mayne. He, would do a story with Japanese media and talk about Japanese candy with them because it didn't involve football. So it's very, he's off the wall, and that's what people enjoy about him, and that's why people kind of love him. He has that endearing personality. But I think what he was able to do with Seattle is makes him worthy of the discussion. That's for sure. And I hope to see him in the conversation one day.
I do too. I love Marshawn. I have another one if that's okay if I keep going.
Sure.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Um, what do you think about Bill Belichick not being a first ballot Hall of Famer?
I think it's a tragedy because the numbers say he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, he pretty much accomplished everything you possibly could as a coach in the NFL. And I really believe that it comes down to a fracture of some sort with him and ownership and Robert Kraft. And it's sad that it got to that point, but here we are. And unfortunately, that's where we are. He's going to be voted into the Hall of Fame. It's one of those situations where you wish Ken Griffey Jr. was a unanimous Hall of Famer, aside from like that one voter that was an idiot who didn't vote him in. It's similar to that story where you had a number of voters, at least enough voters to keep Belichick out of the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. I think it's wrong, and I think eventually he will get in.
Yeah, my background is more baseball. I grew up with that and just the whole, I will never understand a lot of the Hall of Fame votes. I think it's such an interesting political thing.
Yeah, for sure. And the one voter that didn't vote for Griffey was probably steadfast in his belief that there should never be a unanimous Hall of Famer. And that's the reason he did it.
Wasn't there, was it Mariano Rivera was one?
Yeah, yes, you're right. I
Which
think that
is,
was after Griffey, right?
I think so.
It
It makes
was.
it
It
so much more
was. It was
painful.
after Griffey. Yep.
I don't think Willie Mays was even unanimous.
No.
Insane. My last question is one I've really enjoyed asking people. What is your favorite Seattle sports moment, both as a fan and then as a journalist?
So if we'll talk parades. Parades were fun. Um, But I will say my two favorite moments in Seattle were probably Sounders related. And the first one was when they won MLS Cup at home in front of a packed crowd. That was so much fun to win an MLS Cup and a championship at home. I will also say, go back to August of this year and them winning Leagues Cup against Lionel Messi and Inter Miami in front of what was an attendance record crowd at Lumen Field. There were more fans there than had ever attended a Seahawks game as well. The electricity inside that stadium and them beating Inter Miami 3-0 is is definitely up there in some of my one of my favorite moments. Now, there's a story that, well, Aaron, why wouldn't the NFC Championship game against the 49ers be on my list? Well, that's because I wasn't actually in the stadium at the time. We did not have the capability to do post-game shows from in and around the stadium. I actually was in studio at Fox 13, so I wasn't there live for that game, but I was there the following year for the NFC Championship game against the Green Bay Packers, and that was probably the most insane late game comeback I've ever seen in person. Given that they were pretty much dead in the water with about 3 or 4 minutes left in that one.
That's so crazy. I love that kind of stuff growing up in Seattle and hearing what people appreciate about it is always so fun. So thank you.
I do have one more story actually, and it's because of Beastquake. Is in 20. It was I think it was January 2011 when the playoff game actually happened because it was the 2010 season. But Matt Hasselbeck hands the ball off to Marshawn in that playoff game against the New Orleans Saints. And it was right when I was getting into the media elevator. He hands the ball off right when the doors were closing of the elevator. I did not get to see Beastquake live, but I definitely felt the elevator shaking as the quote unquote Beastquake actually happened and Marshawn scored the touchdown. I obviously saw it on replay many times, but the fact, I'll never forget it because it was in slow motion. Marshawn breaks that first tackle and the door of the elevator is actually closing.
Sounds like we should just put you in an elevator every
right.
Big event.
Yeah, that was a fun time.
Hawks went 7-9 in 2010. The 2010 season won the division. That was an interesting year. Hey, I want to go back to the Hawks for a second, and I want to talk about the Seahawks' immediate prior offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, getting the Raiders job. I want to know, could Kubiak be the guy to get the Raiders back to be a better than 500 team? Give me your take on the Kubiak hire with the Raiders.
I mean, I think it's a great hire. He's very deserving. I just don't know. You never know what you're going to get from a first-time head coach. And that could be said for anybody, including Mike Macdonald. One of the reasons I love Mike Macdonald so much when he was hired was because of his history as a defensive coordinator, specifically against Kyle Shanahan's offense. And I know the sample set was only one, but when he was defensive coordinator for the Ravens and they played Brock Purdy and that Shanahan offense in 2023, they forced 5 turnovers. Brock Purdy threw 4 interceptions, and Sam Darnold, as a backup, threw an interception as well in that game. So I was like, this is the reason they are bringing Macdonald to Seattle, because Pete Carroll's defenses clearly are not cutting it against Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan. We had to endure those horrible defenses for so many years in the end of the Carroll years that this is the reason we're bringing Mike Macdonald on. In a similar fashion, I'm hoping and I'm thinking that the Raiders are hoping that Clint Kubiak can instill some offense into that team. I don't know defensively what Kubiak brings to the table. And then again, that's up to him to hire the right guys on defense in a very similar way to Mike Macdonald not hiring the right guy as his offensive coordinator in his very first season, as because clearly Ryan Grubb has never been an NFL coordinator before, was not the right guy for the offensive coordinator job in his first year with the Seahawks. Fortunately, Macdonald made the move to Kubiak, who was more seasoned on offense. So we will see what happens with Kubiak. I wish him nothing but the best. I think there's a little bit of a coincidental irony there that he's taking over for Pete Carroll, who went to the Raiders from the Seahawks. But the fact that they are in a completely different conference and the Seahawks don't play the Raiders, yeah, you can definitely cheer on them from a distance.
I hadn't thought of some of your points. That's a good one. Macdonald and Kubiak at different times are taking over for Pete Carroll. I hadn't thought of that angle. What do you think of this new offensive coordinator the Hawks hired from San Francisco? What's his name? Brian
Yeah,
Fleury?
Brian Fleury. I don't
Yeah.
know too much about him. I know he is very detail oriented,
Yeah.
and you have to respect Mike McDonald for going outside of his own coaching tree and not hiring and not promoting from within, because that's what everybody expected him to do.
Right.
Either bringing up Pete's or your Janoko or one of those guys that had been rumored to be up for a promotion and who all um, internally interviewed for that job. He's bringing somebody else out of the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, who, from all I hear from his work with the tight ends and George Kittle, is that Kittle loved him. That he knew the offense backwards and forwards to the point where he was very detail oriented, and that's what he's going to bring to the Seahawks. Then again, you never know what you're going to get with the first time play caller. And that's what you are getting with Brian Fleury, and something that you didn't have with Clint Kubiak, who had experience calling plays in New Orleans the season prior. So it's a hit or miss with Fleury. On paper, it looks good, but in the situation itself, can he call the right plays and get his team in the right position to score points?
Lot ahead. I think this. I find the Seahawks 2026 upcoming season to be very fascinating on many levels. So we'll have to see. Um, You have covered the Seattle NBA issue for many years. I've heard some of your hard-hitting commentaries, and I share a lot of your sentiments that it was not right what happened when the Sonics left Seattle back in 2008. So I want to help me analyze Adam Silver's comments last Saturday during the NBA All-Star Weekend, Commissioner Silver. So let's do a 0 to 10. 0 from a Seattle NBA fan's perspective. From a fan's perspective, really wants a team back in Seattle. 0 means no room for optimism, just typical NBA word salad, bunch of BS as usual. 10 would mean really this is on the track of us getting a team back, what Silver had to say on Saturday. 0 to 10, how optimistic are you hearing Silver's comments on Saturday?
I'm never going to go above a 7 when it comes to anything that Adam Silver says or anything that a commissioner of the NBA says, because I'm that jaded when it comes to the rhetoric surrounding a potential return of the Sonics to Seattle. So I would probably say a 7. Um, Unfortunately, it has been, as you mentioned, a word salad of sorts for many years, because there were all these hurdles that we had to jump through. First, it was the CBA, and then it was the TV deal, and then it was the sale of the Celtics, and then it was this, and then it was that. And it's like, okay, I mean, how many times can you push this back? We are going to table this until the next meeting so then we can have a conversation about a possible vote at the next meeting. And it just pushes it back and back and back. I've heard that Adam Silver ultimately wants the Sonics back into Seattle because it would help his overall legacy, that he was able to return a team to its city. But at this point, I could care less about his legacy, because his legacy to me is that he's just punted on the idea for so long. And I'm not sure what the NBA owners really want to do. Are they willing to share an extra piece of the pie, extra 2 pieces of the pie, especially if they expand it to 32 teams? Yes, they would be sharing the revenue with 2 more teams, and yet they would be getting a huge sum up front for the cost of an expansion team, which right now is estimated anywhere between $4 and $6 billion. And that's you double that with 2 teams, and you got $8 to $14 billion that these 30 owners are going to split. And you combine that with the television deal that they got that was upwards of how many billions of dollars. How rich do these NBA owners expect themselves to be without having at least a little bit of charity in their minds to say, hey, maybe we should expand to another couple of cities, especially that city that we screwed 17 years ago?
So you put it at a 7. That's pretty optimistic in terms of the likelihood of the team coming back based on Silver's comments on
Yeah.
Saturday. You put it at a
And then again,
7.
I've always been hopeful, and I think it's
Okay.
taken way too long. But I
Yeah.
really do think that the process is going to get into motion this summer. And the
Yeah.
fact that we finally have the arena, we finally have an ownership group that's willing to bring the team back here,
Right.
all the pieces are in place. It's just a matter of getting the go-ahead and the green light from the NBA itself. That's going to come down to the owners, and that's what I'm most skeptical about at this point.
I was thinking on the optimism barometer on the likelihood of the NBA coming back to South. I heard Silver's comments, and so I was thinking maybe a five at best.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that
I
was just
understand that, but
yeah,
I feel like we are getting closer.
kind of right in the middle. Yeah, I can't be totally pessimistic. I can't be highly optimistic either. I know
Yeah.
that's kind of a cop out of an answer in a way,
No.
but kind of. Favorite sports movie,
Rudy.
Rudy.
Rudy and Jerry Maguire, but I'd venture toward Rudy because I still haven't been able to watch Rudy without crying. It hits me every single time when he finally gets on the field, and I think it's Charles Dutton, the actor. He turns around, he plays the groundskeeper, and he's walking away, and he's so excited about it, and he gets me every single time.
Mention kind of an underrated sports movie that you liked, if you can
Ah,
think of one.
underrated. Um, I mean, I just enjoy watching it because I enjoyed it growing up, and then I watched it with my son. He likes Rookie of the Year. I like The Sandlot too, but I would say Rookie
Yeah,
of the Year too. It was really fun.
I like The Fish at St. Pittsburgh.
No, I've never seen it.
Yeah, it's good. And Dr. J's in it.
I've heard about it, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it's fun. It's fun. And I'm just going to throw a plug. I mentioned this on my show quite a few times. There was a movie that took place in my high school in Seattle, Roseville High School, called The Heart of the Game by women's basketball.
Oh, cool.
That's a good one. I got a few more questions there. You've been so gracious with your time. I'll let you go in a minute, or a couple minutes. The Mount Rushmore of Seattle. Mount Rushmore is
Yeah,
in South Dakota. There's monuments of four presidents. Who would be the four biggest sports figures in
yeah.
Seattle sports history?
Yeah, that is so hard. And I feel like I've done this before and I come
Okay.
up with different people every single time.
Okay.
I would put Sue Bird and Ken Griffey Jr. on there for sure.
Okay.
It's just the last two spots that I would have a really hard time figuring out and which direction I would want to go. It's some people
I'd go
say,
Lenny Wilkens,
yeah,
probably.
I was going to say, it's Lenny Wilkens or it's Gary Payton if you're going to go on the basketball
Yeah.
direction. But they never, again, Lenny Wilkens won the championship and Gary Payton never did. Which Seahawk do you want to put on there? Do you want to put Walter Jones? Do you want to put Russell Wilson? Do you want to put Marshawn Lynch? Do you want to put Steve Largent? I don't know. Because I don't think any of them really stand out one above the other. Because then you have to bring championships into my, you have records, then you have championships, and how do you weigh each one of those?
And how can you keep Ichiro and Edgar Martinez off the monument?
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
tricky.
But then you're bringing two Mariners on there. So then what do you do? So yeah, it's a very difficult it's a difficult question. And again, I come up with different people every time. But
I'm with
I
you
would say
on
for
Sue
sure
Bird.
Ken Griffey Jr. and Sue Bird belong on the Seattle Sports Hall of Mount Rushmore.
I think Sue Bird. I probably go Griffey too. But then you have a debate. Is Griffey more of an impactful Mariner than Ichiro or Edgar Martinez?
I would say it's Griffey because he saved Seattle.
Yeah.
He single-handedly saved the Mariners from leaving this town.
Edgar
There's,
was on that team too in '95.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. And you have to, in terms of Edgar was an amazing player, but Edgar wasn't the fielder. Griffey was too. So we have
The fielder, the charisma. I mean,
yeah.
it's a combination of a lot of things there. Yeah.
Although Edgar seems like a good guy for sure.
He is.
Mariners made a couple moves. They made a trade for Brendan Donovan, who was with the Cardinals. I'm going to ask you if you like that trade. And another question I have for you is: are you upset that Suarez signed with Cincinnati?
I'm not upset that Suarez did because of the money that he got, and the Mariners were
Yeah,
never going to pay him the amount that he got for going for the Reds. I love Gino Suarez. He is such a cool guy, and he was so gracious in victory and defeat during the playoffs last year. I remember being in the locker room in Toronto after Game 7 of the ALCS, and his perspective was great. And again, my heart was in my chest talking to Gino and talking to Cal Raleigh specifically because he was the first guy that we saw, and you could see his face was just covered in the tears that he had been crying in the aftermath in the finality of that season. And the last thing I wanted to do was stick a mic in his face. And then again, I knew it was my job, along with like 5 or 6 other people that were going up to him at the same time. I couldn't be the one to hold back, but I didn't love that idea either. I still feel like there should be more of a cool down period after games, because it's tough when your season ends like that. But yeah, to get back to Geno Suarez, I mean, for him to have brought us that moment in Game 5 of the ALCS and the grand slam in the bottom of the 8th inning, and just the joy that he brought to Seattle for the second half of the year when he came back, just really enjoyed having him here. So I will miss Geno Suarez. I don't know enough about Donovan. I'm really I hear great things, look forward to him potentially being the leadoff hitter. You don't know where they're going to put him in the lineup at this point, but I think this is a lineup that can contend for an AL pennant this year. I think they can make it to their very first World Series. The question is, can anybody beat the Dodgers with all the money they're spending?
We'll see. Hey, I got 2 more questions to let you go, but real quickly, did you see that Paul Goldschmidt is almost 40 years old, signed with the Yankees for a 1 year, $4 million deal? That's
No, I
obviously a
did.
lot of money,
Yeah,
but
I didn't know that, but yeah,
yeah,
it feels like he's been around forever.
I don't know. Maybe the Mariners should have taken a stab at him as a DH or so. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
yeah. I mean, they need a DH. There's no question. I
yeah,
mean, unless
yeah.
you're going to put Naylor there, but he's not going to be your regular DH.
I was kind of wondering maybe give Goldschmidt a $5-6 million 1 year deal. I don't know, but what do I know? I don't. Um, 2 more questions. I promise. 2 more. I promise. Um, will Jed Fish be the Husky football coach for the rest of the 2020s?
Um, I don't think so. And I'm just going to go based off of history. I'm listen. He's going into his 2026 season. That means he has to be here for 4 more years: 26, 27, 28, 29. At some point in the next 4 years, he's either not going to be good enough as head coach to retain, or he's going to jump for a different job. I'm surprised, and I will give him all the credit in the world for staying around, especially this offseason when the Michigan job was open. I don't know whether he was even considered for that job or not. Who knows if the Florida job opens? He's an alum from there, so I give him a ton of credit for staying in this position longer than he has in many other of his coaching positions, albeit most of them weren't head coaching positions aside from Arizona. But this is a guy that is a journeyman coach, and I'm really hoping that he has found a home here in Seattle. The fact that he stayed with the Huskies now going into his 3rd season, I would say says a lot, relatively speaking, to where Jed Fish has been in the past. I just don't think he's going to be here past 2029.
We'll see. We'll see. But if we get him through the 2020s, you're thinking probably not. He's probably going to be gone before the 29 season. That's what you're
Yeah,
thinking. Okay. Yeah.
probably. Yeah. Before 2030 at least. Yeah.
Yeah. The Levine crystal ball, right?
Yeah.
My final question is, what's in the future for Aaron Levine? Tell us what you got cooking.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, it's kind of a reset, and we kind of go into baseball season. I love the fact that, the football season was a perfect bridge for probably the first time going into today. We have the first day of Mariners full squad workout, and you got the World Baseball Classic coming up. Really excited this summer for World Cup coming to Seattle for the very first time. That's on Fox 13. We're going to have specials almost every single night. 6 matches coming to Seattle as well at Lumen Field. An opportunity of a lifetime for anybody to experience that. And then right now, the Kraken are 3 points out of first place in the Pacific Division. One of my favorite times covering Seattle sports was during that playoff run 3 years ago with the Kraken. This city turned into Hockey City, USA, and that was surprising to a lot of people. Being with the team in Colorado and then in Dallas during those 2 playoff series was an absolute blast. Hoping I can enjoy something like that again. And then we go right into the World Cup this summer. So it is a great time to be a Seattle sports fan. I said it before, but the last 7 months specifically, between the Sounders winning Leagues Cup and then the Mariners going to the ALDS Game 5, 15 innings, Polanco walk-off game winner, Game 7 of the ALCS, an incredible playoff run, memorable games there. The Seahawks winning a Super Bowl for the 2nd time in franchise history. That crazy Thursday night game, comeback against the Rams in overtime. The playoff run, beating the Rams, beating the Niners, beating the Patriots to get a little revenge for Super Bowl 49. it's just a fun time to be a Seattle sports fan, and I hope it only continues over the course of the next 6 months to a year, if not longer.
For sure. Love it. Love it. And I'm glad you brought the Kraken. I enjoy the team, and thanks for throwing the Kraken in during this podcast.
Of course.
Well, Aaron, what a treat. One more thought I do have. I also
Yeah.
think Don James has a case for the Mount Rushmore of Seattle sports.
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
he has a case. I mean, I guess you could bracket it to a coach's Mount Rushmore only, but I think James has a case as well. What a treat. We'll get this up on social media soon. Aaron, always the best. Look forward to seeing you again in person.